This is the Bertolino Foods HACCP training. This training needs to be completed annually as part of our SQF plan. HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis, Critical Control Point. There are 7 principles or 7 steps to a HACCP plan. The first is to identify what the hazards are during a production process. The second is to determine the critical control point, or the point in the production process where that hazard is likely to occur. The third step is to establish a critical limit, or a number or value or some sort of a measurement that the product cannot exceed. The fourth is establish monitoring procedures. So how are you going to monitor the product to make sure it does not exceed that critical limit at the critical control point? Step 5 is establish a corrective action, or what are you going to do if the product does reach that critical limit? Step 6 is verification procedures. So we need to verify that our monitoring procedures and our corrective actions are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And step 7 is we have to keep records of all of this. So what is HACCP? We're going to play a quick video from the University of Nebraska on Introduction to HACCP Principles.
HACCP has taken food safety practices in our facility to the next level. We have all practiced safe food production in the past, but the implementation of HACCP has emphasized things such as record keeping and corrective actions that we haven't practiced in the past and allowed us to produce safer food.
With HACCP, we're continuously monitoring our checkpoints daily, and at night we go over and check, make sure there's no problems, and we end up with a safer product as an end result.
HACCP is important to food safety because it is a way to prevent food safety hazards from occurring in a food processing plant. It is a step-by-step way to identify these hazards and to create a safe food supply for consumers.
As meat processors, you need to be sure that you have a product that is safe for consumption. HACCP is the program that will help implement safety of your product to the consumer. Everyone from the farm to the table can ensure food safety by executing HACCP. HACCP has been developed by the meat and poultry industry and scientific community as a useful tool to prevent and reduce the levels of food safety hazards. So, who is responsible for the safety of the food supply? The producer, the processor, or the person who prepares the food? The responsibility falls on everyone in the food chain, from the producer to the food processor to the food distributors to the consumers. So where do these food safety hazards come from? Many come from foodborne pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, and other organisms that are found widely throughout nature and the environment. Additionally, other hazards, both chemical or physical hazards, can occur. Foods containing animal proteins such as meat, eggs, poultry, and fish are often known to harbor bacteria, which causes foodborne diseases in humans. Each year, millions of people become ill or even die due to foodborne pathogens. These outbreaks could lead to plant closings. As a food processor, your programs will affect consumers. Nearly 8 million Americans may suffer from foodborne illness each year. With so many people being affected by foodborne illness, food safety is an important concern for the general public. Some experts estimate that each person will experience in some way a foodborne illness within the next year. Will the next outbreak affect you or your family? With this in mind, it is important to ensure that food safety is a part of your plant operation. Governmental officials and health experts consistently rate foodborne illnesses as the greatest food safety threat. What is being done to ensure food safety? The meat and poultry industry, along with the scientific community, have backed a program called HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. The goal of HACCP is to prevent and reduce the incidence of food safety hazards for humans. So what is HACCP? HACCP is based on 7 principles. They include conducting a hazard analysis, identifying critical control points, establishing critical limits, establishing monitoring procedures, establishing corrective action, establishing record keeping, establishing a verification of the system. Now that we know what the 7 principles are, let's look at HACCP closer. Principles 1 and 2 are the main responsibility of the HACCP team. The team will analyze the process for hazards and will determine critical control points for the process. Principles 3 through 7 are designed by the HACCP team but place responsibility in the hands of the plant employees. The HACCP team will determine critical limits, monitoring methods, and corrective actions to be taken. However, the plant employees must take measurements, record observations, and take proper corrective action, or report to upper management when a deviation occurs. The long-term success of a HACCP plan will depend on the individual plant employees. Once the critical control points of the process have been identified, Principle number 3 says that a critical limit for the preventative measure associated with the critical control point must be established. Critical limits are the highest or lowest value to which a hazard must be controlled to prevent, reduce, or eliminate the hazard to human health. It is important that the product reach the critical limits to assure production of a safe food. Principle number 4 is to establish monitoring methods for the critical limit at each critical control point. Each critical limit must be a measurable value like time, temperature, pH, or water activity. Monitoring procedures will describe what you are going to measure to determine the critical limit, temperature, how you are going to measure the temperature with a calibrated thermometer, and who is going to measure the temperature and how often it will be measured, when. Once the monitoring system is in place, the HACCP team will establish corrective actions to be taken when monitoring indicates that a measurement has fallen outside an established critical limit. This is principle number 5. Corrective actions may be the responsibility of the person monitoring the critical limit, or it may be the responsibility of supervisors or others in upper management. Corrective actions are very important to avoid introducing a potential food safety hazard. HACCP principle number 6 is to establish effective record-keeping procedures that documents the HACCP system. Accurate records ensure that each product produced has met the critical limits and that food safety is assured. Records can illustrate the plant took proper actions during the foodborne outbreak. Records would include such things as the measurements taken at each critical control point and corrective actions taken if the critical limit had not been met. The final HACCP principle is verification. Verification procedures ensure that the HACCP system is working correctly. Verification is a process to check the whole system to make sure that the HACCP plan is preventing, reducing, or eliminating food safety hazards. The HACCP team decides what activities are important for verification. Part of the verification would be to check the record keeping and that measurements are made properly, to review corrective action taken and why they were taken in an effort to prevent further occurrence. Some verification duties may involve outside individuals. Periodic microbial tests will determine if the system is performing as it was designed to and reducing bacterial levels in the system.
Okay, so after watching that video, let's go over the 7 steps of a HACCP plan in our plan. So before I do this, I want to say that HACCP is an alternative to having to conduct quality tests on every single product we produce on the production floor. Okay, so here at Bertolino Foods, we identified different hazards. The biggest hazard that we identified as a potential threat to the quality and food safety of our product is if the temperature exceeds bacteria growth due to high temperature. So we determined the critical control points. So for here, the critical control points would be where in the production process do we believe it is going to be the warmest. That could be grinding or mixing or cutting or trimming. Where do we think it's going to be the warmest for each product? 3, establish critical limits. For us, the critical limit is 40 degrees. Anything above 40 degrees for the product has exceeded the critical limit. Establish monitoring procedures. The monitoring procedures are temperatures taken in the morning and afternoon by supervisors and managers. Establish corrective actions. Here the corrective action is take the product, put it in the freezer, and alert your supervisor that the product has exceeded 40 degrees. From there, the product has 2 hours to drop below 40 degrees. If the product drops below 40 degrees in less than 2 hours, we can put it back into production. If the product does not drop below 40 degrees in 2 hours, then it needs to be taken out of production. Step 6 is establish verification procedures. We do an annual review of our HACCP plan. We do direct observations of the employee taking the measurement to make sure that they're doing it correctly. We also use a calibrated thermometer in order to take those measurements. Step 7 is record keeping. Records are kept for a minimum of 3 years here at Bertolino Foods. Okay, so let's break hazard up into the 2 categories. The first is hazard analysis, so that's asking the question, what could go wrong? And the next is critical control point. What are we doing to make sure that nothing goes wrong? So let's talk about the 3 potential contaminants that could be controlled with a HACCP plan. There's biological, chemical, and physical. Biological includes things like bacteria, pathogens, microbes, viruses. Chemical includes things like allergens and cleaning chemicals and sanitizers. And physical can be something like foreign object, jewelry, bandages, glass, or plastic. So obviously we have other things in place to control for these potential contaminants, such as a metal detection for metal, as well as a approved chemical program for chemicals, and then E. coli program for measuring different biological, for measuring E. coli. All those are potential contaminants, but the one critical control point that we have, the one CCP we have, is temperature exceeding 40 degrees on the production floor. So here are examples of potential non-conforming products, food safety issues, putting the wrong label on a product, expired raw material, damaged raw material, packaging or finished products, sanitation issues, exposed raw material, off-condition products. So who is responsible to make sure that these non-conforming products don't reach our customer? Everyone is. It is the responsibility of all employees to report food safety problems to their supervisor, the food safety team leader, or directly to top management. All employees should be aware of any product that is found to be non-conforming and notify management immediately. So we're going to go through 3 questions. Before we do that, just a quick summary. There are a lot of different potential contaminants that we're looking out for on the floor. We have a program, our GMP program, that monitors a lot of those. Example like metal. Another example is chemical. But then we also have what is considered our critical control point, which is basically the best way to describe it is the biggest risk on the production floor. So that being said, please, after you look at the question, please pause the video and see if you can come up with the answer yourself, and then I'll give the answer after that. Question 1, what is our CCP? The answer is temperature in production. Question 2, what is the operational limit for that CCP? The answer is 40 degrees. And if you remember, we monitor this by looking at the production process, identifying where we think the warmest spot of that production process will be. So maybe that's at the grinder or during the cutting phase or during the mixing phase. And we try to take the temperature at the warmest point. Question 3, what should you do if the operational limit has been reached? Of course, you alert your supervisor, but you also place that product in the freezer. Remember, the product has 2 hours to drop below 40 degrees. If the product drops below 40 degrees in 2 hours, you can easily put it right back into production. If the product does not drop below 40 degrees after 2 hours, then the product must be taken out of production. This includes the HACCP training. Thank you.